Now I have the new idler installed, torqued down, torqued to about 25-30 foot-pounds torque. I have the tensioner loosely installed. I don't have it tightened down in any fashion yet. I have the crank sprocket marked aligned. I'll show you how I put the bolt back in to be able to turn it temporarily. But let's take a look here, see if we can show you the mark there. Let me find it in the viewfinder. There we are. Alright, you see that? That's what it should look like. There you go, it's kind of straight on. That's your lower mark, top dead center. So now what we're going to do is we're going to have to take a wrench and we're going to have to line these sprockets up the way the diagram shows, and I'll show you how we do that once it's in place. And then we're going to start threading the belt on, and I got a little trick I'll show you about how to keep these sprockets from jumping around on you once you try to start putting the belt on. So back at you in a minute. Well, I thought I would show you the Makeshift Cam Holder that I'm using. It looks kind of hokey, but it actually did the job. This is not my idea. I was having a lot of problems getting these cams in sync, getting the marks lined up on them. It's just not hard. It's not easy to do by one person at all. So what I did was I just took the wrench. Your cam's got little flats on it right there. You see, kind of right there on that spot. You can get a wrench on it and an adjustable over here. And I just kind of messed around with them until I got the marks lined up. And then when I did that, I'm telling you, it's not easy, but you got to just clamp it with a set of vice grips, and it'll hold your cams in while you're working on the belt, because these cams, you know, they're right up on the lifters, and the spring tension tries to knock them off the lifter. So you'll get it kind of set, and just when you bump it, there it goes too far one way or the other. So it's a pain. And then I just took some tie wraps and once again just tie wrap the belt on where I think it ought to go. So I'm going to try it this way. I think I've got the marks all lined up now. This is a lot more difficult to do than I thought it was going to be one person, these double cams, but it's doable. So now I'm just tightening the tensioner up down there, and I'll have to put once I do that, I'll have to put the spring on, and I'll show you how that goes. So, and then I'll turn the engine over by hand several times to make sure the marks line up. Be sure to take all this off once you get the tensioner tightened. Okay, everybody, I hope you stuck with me through all this. Got the belt on. I have rotated the engine around a couple times by hand to make sure that it's all the marks are lined up, and they are. I've got the tensioner on down there. You see there, bolted in. Now, there's been differing opinions about these tensioners. Some people say that they've got a spring on them because they're a automatic tensioner. I don't think so on these. I've looked at one of these tensioners several times, several different ways. This is the old one. And as you can see, it bolts in here to the engine block. And you've got an adjustment here with it. You can stick in an Allen key, which I have one, and rotate it around and things like that. But there's no ratcheting mechanism on this, unless I'm just not looking at it correctly. You see this back here? This is where your spring goes. It orients on the block pretty much like this. If you're looking at the side of the engine bolted up, it's about like this, and you got the spring that comes up. I'll show you in there that pulls on this. And I've studied on this, and people say, well, just go ahead and bolt it down tight to the block and the spring does the work for you. I don't see how that's going to work. I don't think that's true on these. I think it may be. Maybe I'm not seeing part of this. There may be a spring mechanism in there, but what I'm doing myself is, when I put mine on, it didn't, if I bolted it down tightly to the block, it didn't really want to adjust anyway. I mean, I could turn it with a key one way or the other and adjust it, even with that spring on. You see with the spring where it hooks out there, it hooks to that little post, and then down, can't hardly see it, but down, you see there's the other end. Whoops. Let me back out. There's the other end where it hooks to the tensioner. So what I've done is I just backed the bolt out on this tensioner just far enough so that it went to wherever the spring pulled it. So it's just under spring tension right now, the spring that you see there. And then I'm going to carefully, now that I've turned the engine a couple times to settle the belt, I'm going to just carefully go ahead and torque that bolt down to about, it goes to about 25 foot-pounds of torque or so, and then without trying to, you know, turn the tensioner itself in any way, and that should establish the belt tension pretty well. Now it maybe it's got an automatic feature in it as the belt stretches. I don't know, but I guess I'll find out. But I'm giving you guys the only knowledge I have. I've been on the internet, and there's, you know, some people say bolt them down as far as you can, as hard as you know, to spec, and then put the spring on and rotate it with a key. You know, I personally, I think there's a chance of getting the belt too tight that way, or too loose. So this is how I'm going to do it. We'll see how it works. I'm going to go ahead and torque that tensioner down now, and my marks seem to be perfectly lined up. We'll look at the bottom one. Pay very close attention to this. This is what you want to end up with before you bolt everything back together on this. Here's the bottom cog, and you look, I'll get the light out of the way. You look up in there, and you see there's your cutout. Hopefully you can see that. Let me move this a little bit, maybe. Okay, it's not helping. Well, you can see it kind of there in the kind of shadow on it. Sorry about that, but you see what we're dealing with. We got a cutout back there I showed you earlier, and then we got that protrusion. That's your top dead center mark for the crankshaft. And then you come up here to the camshaft marks. And you look at them, as I showed you on that diagram. See there, and the way we're looking at it, I can't hardly get in there with the camera. Let's see if I can get the camera down a little bit lower. I don't think I'm going to be able to, but I can see from the side though that they're on. Let me do something here. Sorry for the shaky camera work, guys, but when you only got two hands, it's not easy sometimes. Let's do this. It'd be nice to have more than two hands, wouldn't it? Like an octopus. I don't think I need 8, but alright. So you see I've got a piece of paper there under those marks, under them, and they're just squarely lined up with that protrusion there when I'm across there. So intake on the left, exhaust on the right, because this is your exhaust cam here. Look on this side of the engine, you got the manifold over here, and the intake manifold's there, so that's how you know which cam's which. So to me, it looks good enough to call it good. So only thing to know is when button it back up and start it and see how it runs. Now, like I said, this is a forgiving engine because it's non-interference. So if you mess something up, don't panic. You've not broken anything. You may have to just go back in and redo it. But it's a good one to learn timing belts on. So the only thing we got to do now is just basically put everything back in the reverse procedure, reverse order. You'll put your harmonic balance or your crank pulley, whatever you want to call it, you bolt it back on, and that thing's got to be torqued down to about 120 foot-pounds of torque. So if you got an impact, that's good. If you don't have an impact, then you might have to do what I'm going to do and see if you can lock the flywheel somehow. If I do that, I'll show you this as part of the video. But we want to be sure to get a torque wrench and torque that thing down, that pulley down there. Use a little bit of Loctite on the bolt also when you're doing that. And then just put all your covers back on, and then put your belts back in. Tension them back about where they were, just so they feel good. And put your mount back on the end. Put your valve cover back on. I've got a new valve cover gasket set. I'll show you a little bit of that. And put your plug wires back on. Be sure all your electrical connections are reconnected that you took loose earlier. And just go over everything again. Visually, just take a good look at it. And make sure you got it all done, guys. And that should do it. There'll be a little bit more to see here as I do the valve cover and some other things. Anything I need to show you, I will. So stay tuned. Okay, guys. Here's something that may look ludicrous at first glance, but maybe this will work. This being an automatic transmission, there's no way for me to block the crankshaft from rotating when I'm tightening this crank bolt that you see there in the center. That has to be tightened to 120 foot-pounds of torque using a torque wrench. And so it's going to have some force on it. So I can't get into the flywheel to stop it, and there's really no other way to conceivably stop the engine from turning. You don't want to you don't want to try to use the camshaft pulleys because they can break. They're not that stout. So what I've done is I got into my harmonic bouncer puller kit over here, and these should be pretty stout bolts. I think they got 8.8 on the ends of them, so they should be pretty strong. And I got the appropriate bolts that fit into that crankshaft pulley, and I've threaded them in as far as I can. The one on the top there is just got enough room to catch on the metal of the car, and the one on the bottom here, I've taken my large floor jack and jacked it up and got a piece of wood under it, so it's pretty much the crank's pretty much blocked from turning. So I'm going to go ahead and see if this will work. I'm going to have to use a slightly long extension here to do this, but maybe this will work out and keep the engine from turning. I'll let you know. Okay, guys, let me show you exactly what I had to do to get this thing to finally go all the way. You saw I put those two bolts in. I tried the jack with a piece of wood. It ended up bending the bolts. So what I did was I got my cheater bar, which is an old jack handle. I straightened one of the bolts back out, and you can see it kind of hanging off of it right there. And what I did was I essentially stood here and pulled up on this torque wrench with one hand as hard as I could and pushed down on the jack handle with the other one as hard as I could. Well, actually I think what I ended up having to do, I told you wrong just now. I didn't have to push down. I had to pull up on the jack handle because it tries to, you see it's against the frame of the car and it's trying to bend it down. So I pulled on both of them. I mean, you talk about something weird to do, but it worked. I finally got it to click at 120 foot-pounds of torque. You don't want to mess with a crankshaft pulley. I mean, you know, you need to get it back, even if you got to take it back off again, do this all over again. It's a pisser, but you don't want to mess with it because the thing, if it vibrates and starts trying to walk off there, it can ruin the key and ruin the end of the crankshaft. You just don't frig with it. Just do it the right way. If you can't get it the first time, take a break. But it's on there, so 120 foot-pounds of torque, it clicked, so that's done. I'm done messing with that part of it now. So that's how I did it. It's not easy. I'm just going to warn you right now, it's not easy. Thanks for watching. Okay, she's all back together except for the valve cover. That's what I'm working on now. Just put a new gasket in. Back her up a little. Well, I guess it is backed up. This is a new name brand valve cover gasket. It just lays in. You just need to go around. It's just kind of one of these perma-dry gaskets, I guess you would say, permanent. You don't know what that means, but it just lays in, and that one just pulled right out. This is it over here. It was actually still in pretty good shape, but just be sure these channels are clean. You don't have to use any sealant on these. It's designed not to. And just go all the way around it once you get it in position, and make sure that you push it all the way down. It's not got any kinks. Or my assistant over there, he's in charge of hunting up critters tonight. Just make sure it's all weighed in like it is, especially down in here where these cam caps go. So, alright, well, and also one other thing, they give you these new grommets to put in. They go right here where the bolts go, so be sure you can, well, you don't have to use them if you don't want to. There wasn't anything wrong with the old ones, but I guess I was going to say be sure that you remember that the two longest, these go right here in these there, and where is it? Right there. So don't forget that. Don't put them in the wrong place. Alrighty. Okie dokie, guys, about 10 p.m. and we're to the moment of truth. Everything's all back together. Get the valve cover in, wires back in, plug-ins back plugged in, PCV back there at the back on, random hose there back on. Make sure you got all that back on, and just go over everything. Look at all your belts, make sure you hadn't left anything off before you try to start. Make sure all your tools are out of the way. Make sure your motor mount's bolted back down. Just check the oil, got plenty of oil, so that's good. And by the way, I'll show you a couple of things here. First of all, you're going to have to go back around this valve cover about 3 times, torquing it. But just remember, this is an aluminum head, and these are only 10mm bolts, so don't go cranking the hell out of them. All you do is just go, I think when I was doing it, had my ratchet, I don't have it here handy, but I was just holding my ratchet at the very up at the end by the socket, and just till it got snug. Went all the way around them, and then the center too, all the way around them again, because they loosened up because the gasket set on it. And the third time seemed like the charm. So I would recommend driving a few thousand miles and come back and check them again. But don't over torque them. I mean, you're talking maybe a couple foot-pounds of torque at the most, because that gasket doesn't need a lot of force on it. And the other thing is, if you're worried about these plug wires, it's very simple to get these back the right way because they're numbered. 1, 2, 3, 4. They're on the plug wires. Now, if you got replacement plug wires, they may not be numbered, but obviously, for one thing, the links will match. So if you got one in the wrong spot, it's going to look weird. But what you may want to do is you may want to just take, if you don't have numbers on your wires, just maybe take a piece of tape and number them, if that makes you feel more secure in that. But anyway, battery's hooked up. I hope it's charged enough. I haven't tried it. So let me get this tripod here set back up, and if this runs, it'll be the first time I've ever heard this car run. So yeah. Superfly, do or die. She's running. Battery sounded a little bit low. I don't have my splash shield on yet. I'll do that a little bit later on. Alright, to answer anybody's questions whether a Mazda Protege of this vintage is interference or not, it is not, so good deal. go for a ride. Job done. And I'm tired. Good night.